and later on for posterity are you guys. So thanks for having me. I know Lindy and Brett are here. What I wanted to do before I dive in was just a couple minutes and understand who you all are. I've spoken quite a bit at the Conway Business Center in Columbus, at Otterbein, and we have some clients that are family-owned businesses, and you can get a real small business that's family-owned, and like Inglefield Oil is a GBQ client, and they're almost $1 billion. If you've been to a Duke and Duchess, you've been to their organization. So just a real quick sense, how many of you are under 25 people? So some small people under 50. Anybody bigger than that? So we got a good hodgepodge, as we said before. So I'm going to introduce myself. I think you know GBQ. Introduce us, introduce my team, kind of give you a sense of where I'm coming from, and then dive into it. Family-owned businesses are pretty unique from a cybersecurity perspective, because many times the blend between what's at home and what's at the office, or many times between what's an employee and what's a family member, creates a number of challenges in terms of what we call attack surface. You're broader, you're easier to hit. So we're going to talk through some of those things. I think you know GBQ. Brett and Lindy would report me to marketing if I didn't put these slides in here. So a little bit about us. My team, based largely in Columbus, but we do have half of an accountant up here that's a part of our client accounting service practice. Andrew, if anybody of you worked with him, that helps us with some of our cybersecurity phishing testing and some of the work that we do. So we do have a person up here. Traditionally, GBQ for about 10 years had an IT services practice, and we did risk management. How do I manage risk? How do I manage, if any of you are in a business that has compliance purposes, there are clients obligations you have to meet, that risk management piece. The cybersecurity is more the bits and bytes. How does the computers work? How do we keep bad people out of the computers? And then IT governance, which is the really exciting, sexy IT policies and all that kind of fun stuff. And we acquired a firm in January called Talent Crowd. And now we do AI and automation, we do data and analytics, and we're doing business systems development. So our perspective, or my perspective, is working within this context with clients of all sizes, a good number of family-owned businesses. Most of my time spent with business leaders, really helping you understand what your risks are, what your choices are, the trade-offs. I've got a really large family-owned business in Columbus that you've probably heard of, Highlights for Children. I coach their security officer and facilitate their committee, their security committee. I'm not much for the bits and bytes anymore. Enough gray in my beard that there are people that are younger and a little bit more aggressive in terms of keeping up on the actual bits and bytes part of the technology. So we've got a good mix of folks that handle that. But I really come at it from your perspective, is how do I manage risk? How do I maintain a resilient business? Because generally a cybersecurity attack, boil it all down, you're not having cash come in because you can't produce, you can't ship, you can't bill, you can't operate. And so at the end of the day, from a business standpoint, being secure from a cyber perspective is really maintaining some resiliency so that your business can operate even though bad things happen. So what I want to do today, really from a learning objectives perspective, talk about some of the common attacks, talk about some of the weaknesses that you have from that unique perspective of a family-owned business. We're not going to cover every technology piece. First off, you throw me out because it get really boring. Secondly, everybody's got a different situation, but we're going to talk about some basics. This happens, and I think it was just kind of a random thing. This happens to be National Cybersecurity Month. So we'll kind of talk about it from that standpoint. We'll talk about human risk. Humans are really the weakest link. And when we're in a family-owned business, that can really cause some problems. We'll talk about incident response, what happens if something bad happens, and then some next steps. And I am generally an interactive speaker. So if I say jargon that you don't understand or you want to tell a story, feel free to jump in. So as I said before, it's all about managing risk. Risk, the joke in the security industry is we can put three risk managers in a room and come up with 4 definitions of what risk is. And so this is a pretty simple one. Risk is threat, the bad thing, the bad guy, the bad actor, vulnerability or weakness. times the probability, or you might think of as likelihood, and then the business impact. And so when we do a risk assessment, we're trying to calculate that. When you think about risk, you're running through that in your head, whether you're doing the math or not. I've got this bad thing or bad actor. I've got a weakness. I've got my house. The front door is not locked. Nobody's home in the neighborhood during the day, and there have been other cases of people having break-ins. I've got a risk there that I need to cover. And we think about those kinds of things from a technology perspective, just like you do in other ways when you think about risk. When we do a risk assessment, kind of hard to see from where you guys are sitting. We come in and we do an assessment. We look at the IT program. We look at how mature that program is. We look at the controls that are in place, the locks on the doors, so to speak. And we look at compliance issues. We look at just about any technology, and that's how we calculate risk. And then this is the process that when we get to the end of today, using a checklist that I handed out and some other homework that I'll have for you to go back and think about risk on your own, you're going to start there. Where are my things? What's controlling their security? Where do I have weaknesses? How do I address those? Then we go through an improvement process. How do we implement safeguards or controls that will improve the client's posture? And then it's how do we manage it ongoing? It's not a one-time thing. It's not do a security assessment, fix things, and then you're done. It's an iterative process. So it's steps 1, 2, and 3 from this process that we use. It's kind of interesting. And now I'm going to be blind here, but 63% of small businesses cite cybersecurity as a top concern. Cyber attacks, 50% of them are directed at small businesses. We think about the big businesses that end up in the news, but the small businesses that are ransomed and taken offline, we don't think about them. We're weaker, the small business is weaker, and so attacks are much more likely to occur for the small business. 47 small businesses claim to have a security plan. So I'm not going to ask you to raise hands, but how many of you think you have a security plan? Is it written down? It's pretty good. 43 small businesses reacted or had to deal with a cybersecurity event in the last year. 23% feel very prepared to handle a cyber attack. I don't know if you're here because the lunch is really good downstairs, or this was the thing that was on your mind. But education is a way to prepare. But sometimes people come to these events because they don't feel prepared. So I'm not gonna judge. But it's fairly typical for small businesses or businesses of any size to not feel like they're prepared. What's interesting is 21%, so 1/5 of businesses do a regular risk assessment of where they stand and where their posture is. So we're worried about it. We're often attacked, but many times we don't look at coming in and really assessing where we're at. So it's really a perfect storm of vulnerability for you all. Many small businesses and everybody, even the biggest business in here is probably not an enterprise level business. We have limited resources. So, most firms spend about 10% of their IT budget on cybersecurity. Some don't feel the ability to have that spend. And then many times we find in small businesses, it's the CFO is managing IT. The IT manager really doesn't have the breadth and depth to be a part of the management team in terms of skill set. We're managing IT through a managed service provider. We don't have the time or the treasure to put a full-time security person in place. The operational characteristics that happen in small businesses, how many of us have written policies and procedures? All of your policies and procedures? So, the issue is a lot of times we don't write things down. It's verbal handoffs in terms of how things are done. Some of our processes are informal. And when plug family members into that, it can get worse. We have a lot of unprotected business systems. Again, we're making decisions about implementing technology without maybe some of the professional thinking that needs to go into it. We've seen a pandemic hit. Everybody pushed out to Microsoft 365. People bought it based on price, ended up with a license that didn't have all the security controls. And then we saw a lot of events. So sometimes our decision-making leads us to unprotected systems. Sometimes when it's, we have to spend money on things that can produce our product or service, we don't upgrade systems, and old systems can be much more vulnerable. So that technical debt that a smaller business is going to carry can really add to the vulnerability that small business has. And then small businesses are an attractive target. You have a big business, some of the bigger clients that we work with, they have full-time security people. All they're doing all day is measuring risk, finding vulnerabilities, having the rest of the IT department close those vulnerabilities, defending attacks, or managing services that defend attacks. Most of us are in a small business, and I'm really speaking from a GBQ perspective as well. We have a CIO and we have a team of people. Our CIO spends most of his time managing cybersecurity. If you don't have somebody managing it all the time, you're going to be weaker than a big business. A big businesses have it happen. Equifax, was that 4 or 5 years ago now, was breached, and they had a 220 some person security team. So it's not all about the staff, but small businesses tend to be more attractive to an attacker. Some of us don't think we're targets, but if I can get to your business on the internet, I can attack you from the internet, kind of a thing. So one of the most unique things about a family-owned business, every business has business systems and has to protect those. And every business has third parties, your accountant, maybe your managed service provider, your ERP that may be in the cloud, your CRM that may be in the cloud, ADP. We have a whole list of service providers. And so that's not unique. That's fairly typical for businesses. What is unique for many small family-owned businesses is the home network and the family technology ends up getting plugged in to the business. We did a security assessment a number of years back and found a couple Xboxes and PlayStations in the corporate office of a firm that was big enough to know better, because the kids would come in after school, and mom and dad's being what mom and dads are is go play games, but it was on the network. Instead, there were things that could have been done to have let them play games at the office and done it in a protected way, but that technology tends to bleed in. If you search the archives of Channel 10, you'll find the story, but there's a former Ohio State football player who had a business. The business was attacked, ransomed. It ransomed in a way what we call ransacked. So they got into his business system. They took all the data. They started threatening him to pay. He told him where to go. And one morning he swatted. So the hacker had a SWAT team called the police and had a SWAT team show up, really putting him at risk. And it was because he was mixing his business and his home networks. And so the hacker was able to find where he lived. So we got there's a real issue there. Now you probably go look at Channel 10's archives. I won't say who it was, but it was on TV. But it was Ohio State's one of Ohio State's players from the national championship, the further one out, not the most recent one. And then we have personal devices. The same case with him. He didn't have a demarcation between his personal machine and his business machine. So all the things that you want to do on a personal machine have local admin rights so that you can download software, things of that sort. Exposed him. And so we see that a lot in small businesses that are family owned. Before GBQ acquired my firm, I'm not so sure sometimes when I left the office and when I was at home. It was as long as I had my laptop with me. And so we tend to blend our lives more in a family owned business. And that creates exposures, not just for the business, but for the family as well. So I'm going to go through 4 common attacks. One is phishing. I'm sure everybody here knows what phishing is. Phishing is when the bad actor sends a message in such a way to induce you to do something, usually to go somewhere, and enter credentials. There's one that's fairly common that you'll get a message that says that your Microsoft, you need to log into your Microsoft 365, and it's a phishing message. There's others that'll get you to click on things. Once you've done that, there's a whole bunch of things that they can do. We'll talk about ransomware. We'll talk about attack or account takeover, and we'll talk about third parties behaviors, third party breaches. But it all begins for the most part with phishing. Almost every breach event that we deal with, there's a human involved. And we'll talk about, as I said before, that human element. But phishing is when you get that message that kind of compels you to do something, induces you to do something that you probably shouldn't do. They used to be really easy to see. The English was terrible. They were kind of oddly worded. Now they're getting pretty good. AI is playing a role. A lot of the bad actors they live in English speaking countries, or they came here for school. So they're able to craft those messages pretty well. And now they're kind of moving out of email. How many have a fine on the tollway? It's a little bit harder for you guys up here, because like I get one down in Columbus and it's in a state I've never been in, but you could have one out here on 80 or 90. The worst case of the texting, we had one of the committees that I facilitate, the CFO got a text with her car parked in an illegal spot in Nashville with the license plate, a photo of the license plate, never been in Nashville. So some of it's getting pretty sophisticated. Obviously, when you get things like, the post office doesn't know where you live, can you please log in and give me your address, kind of stuff is terrible, but they keep doing it because people keep falling for it. And so there's just a huge deluge of phishing. I've been talking about cybersecurity for years, and phishing, and one of the other ones that's coming up, ransomware, we just can't solve it. So we keep talking about it. We'll talk about some things to put in place. But it's just people that are really smart that could be generating wealth, taking care of people, servicing mankind, that decide they're going to steal from people. And the easiest way to do that is to come through the human. So I'm sure everybody's heard of ransomware. It keeps people up very late at night. It's when a bad actor gets into a system and essentially scrambles the data and encrypts it, where there has to be a key put in place. Many times there's a ransom demand. I'll give you the key for a certain amount of money or Bitcoin. These days they're taking the data. So they'll take the data, they'll look for things like how much you have in your bank account. They'll look for your cyber liability policy. And when they tell you that you can pay $50,000, they know you can pay $50,000. The other thing that they'll do is, once you kind of address the ransomware, whether you recover or pay, we the FBI recommend you don't pay. If you have cyber liability insurance, you want to follow the thinking of your carrier. Sometimes it does make more sense to pay, but paying feeds that market. So once you've gotten through that unscrambling, there's a second attack a lot of times these days, which is we have your private data. And so ransomware, very, very difficult to address. We'll talk a little bit. The best defense for ransomware is get backups, so that you don't have to give that key to get your data back. But many times people don't have really good backups. Account takeover is when a bad actor actually takes an account over. And so in the case of the story I told about the Ohio State football player, the bad actor got in, took his account over, took the data, ransomed the data. Sometimes we address attacks called business email compromise. And that's when somebody gets into an email system. It might be yours, might be a client's. And Brett owes me money because I beat him in golf. totally made up story. And Brett goes to pay me, and Lindy's got into the email system, and she gets the email and redirects it to another bank. And then when I go to pay, Brett doesn't get his money. The other bank does, and that's business email compromise. We call it a man in the middle attack, or a Lindy in the middle attack in this case. But that account takeover could happen on your system or on your client's system. I don't know if any of you have had an issue where the client says they've paid you and they didn't, because they paid the bad actor who was in their email system. So sometimes those kinds of things can get a little bit difficult to work through. You lose the client? Do you forgive the client's debt? How do you work through that kind of thing? So sometimes it's not our accounts that they get into, but some of the relationships that we have, which then speaks to the third-party compromise. We depend on systems that are outside of our businesses these days. And so many times when a business fails, when a service provider fails, it slows our business down. We do a lot of work in the restaurant industry, and an NCR product called Aloha, which is a ERP that's special for the restaurant industry, was ransomed and was offline for an incredible amount of time. We have a couple smaller family-owned restaurants that did a lot of trade in gift cards, and their gift cards were, they didn't know, do I have a $500 gift card, or do I have a gift card that was $500 last year when I used it, when I came and laid it at the table to pay my bill? Because for several months, Aloha wasn't able to get that system back online. There are other examples of critical systems going offline. Your managed service provider. If you think about those critical businesses that you depend on, who can you operate? Who could you not operate without? And those are the third parties that you need to worry about, because many times it's the third party's breached. They'll take their data, it might be your data. So how do we understand what those risks are? Because that's something that's really growing more and more as we kind of spread these services out. I had no idea. This sticks out like a sore thumb. I had no idea where to stick this. Who heard of the Amazon outage a week ago? So something that I routinely bump into with business leaders is a misunderstanding of what Amazon started. I think it was in 2011 or 12. In their contracts, they started putting a shared responsibility clause. And this graphic's actually out of their online contract. If you signed an agreement or clicked through an agreement, not read all the legalese, but just clicked through it, you have agreed, if it's a cloud platform like Amazon or Microsoft, or a software as a service application like HubSpot, or any of a number of other tools that you might use, you've agreed to a shared responsibility clause. So usually about 99% of cloud attacks are because the client, the customer, did something wrong. And a lot of times when we get involved, or when you look at some of the statistics out in the press, the customer didn't understand what their responsibility was. Last week was not, that was Amazon, was an Amazon issue. But it's a great trigger to talk about that. You have probably signed agreements, NetSuite or Dynamics or any of the other Acumatica, any of those ERPs that are in the cloud. You signed a shared responsibility agreement. And that's something that you want to go back and look at, because your business has acknowledged that you have a role in protecting that system. And many times we'll hear, well, NetSuite has the backups, or NetSuite does this, or Acumatica does that, HubSpot does that, Aloha didn't do that. And so that's an example of where, not knowing what that shared responsibility is. We do tabletop tests where we come in and kind of role play through what would happen if. I don't know if any of you have done that with your insurance carriers, or kind of step through that process. We did it with an executive team, and the guy on my team that does it was an operational risk manager at Huntington for years. And when he does it, he starts off with, don't fight the exercise. And it was, what happens if NetSuite is ransomed? And we had some execs, that's never going to happen. NetSuite has us. Well, it was a ransomware that we played through, and we got to the end, and the team, the executive team said, well, we'll just restore the data from NetSuite. And we were like, go talk to NetSuite about what that means. Their shared responsibility clause, they will restore the configuration. So the reports, the screens, the way the system is set up, financial data is on the responsibility of the business. So it would behoove you to look at your critical systems and look at the, kind of use this Amazon thing as a trigger to look at those agreements, particularly if you've got a cloud-based ERP or another critical business system that's in the cloud. And this is a little bit more on the shared responsibility piece. Amazon kind of pioneered it. Again, it was like 2011, 2012. Even Microsoft did very clearly, we'll call it shared responsibility. You get into some third parties and they may not call it that. They may call it something else, like user responsibilities or something else, but that pattern is in almost every cloud business that you interact with today. So 4 cybersecurity essentials, and this is from National Cybersecurity Awareness Month. They've been furloughed and they didn't update the program this year. So it's this year, same as last year. The handout that we put, one of the handouts that we included was a checklist that goes beyond what the National Cybersecurity, the organization CISA, which is a part of Homeland Security, recommends. These are real basic. So for some of you that are, over 25 employees, there's quite a bit more that you probably want to do. We want to make sure our employees can defend themselves against phishing. That we want to teach them about proper email handling. We want to, and that we have a service. Your MSP, managed service provider, may have a service. We get phished. Brett and Lindy and I get phished once a month. I've been at GBQ for 9 years and fell for it once. I would like to say my security guys have never fallen for it. It's not true. Anybody can fall for it. We'll talk a little bit why that is, but that instant gratification of, Doug, you reported a phishing attack, or no, Doug, that was part of the campaign, and then I'm punished by getting the same phishing attack within the next couple of weeks. And if I keep doing it, I get to have a conversation with our CIO. I don't know if you guys you talked to Rob about either one of you? No, I won't call you out. The first, actually, it's kind of funny. The first month I was at GBQ, it was November, so we're coming up on my 9th year anniversary, and they pushed one of these phishing emails out, and Brett and Lindy are licensed to the Ohio Society of CPAs, but the Society of Ohio CPAs put a note out to all the CPAs in the firm that their license had been revoked because of a fraud report, and they got like 40-50% click through. I was completely safe because I don't have a CPA license, but the learning experience from failing for something that the attackers use is tremendous to teach people the kind of proper behavior that we want. Require strong passwords. Today, that means something longer than 14 characters. We coach people to either get a password manager and have really super long carriers. If you've let your browser, your phone create a really strong password, those are nearly impossible to remember. If you don't have a password manager, create a passphrase. I know somebody that every one of her passwords is a derivative of I hate passwords. So you can kind of play the trick. The trouble is playing the trick is we all play the same tricks. And so the bad guys know it. It's just a math problem. It's an older statistic, but you take a room of 100 people and tell them that they have a 10-digit strong password, uppercase letter, lowercase letter, a number, and a special character. And you'll get 2 people out of that 100 that'll have summer 2025 exclamation point. And you talk statistics all the time, and it's, is it real? I was in a sales call once when I did that, and both people in the room had, it was summer like 2018 or something. Because people do exactly what we tell them to sometimes. We don't think they do. Uppercase, lowercase, number, special character. It'll get you there. So password manager is better to deploy those. We use 1Password at GBQ, so we can, leverage that, have stronger passwords than what the mind's gonna be able to remember. Require multi-factor authentication. Does everybody know what multi-factor is? So, it's something I know, my password is something I have. It can be, typically it's a phone or it's a token of some sort. It can be my eyes or my fingerprint, but we're not seeing a lot of that stuff. It's easier to do on the phone. Most of your actually, I would say all cyber carriers require it now. What we find is organizations, a lot of times they'll have it on their main systems, but they won't have it on all their systems. So those, again, going back to the cloud, those software as a service apps, when I log in, when I come into the office and I log in, or I'm sitting at home and I log into 365, I'm entering my password, I'm getting a multi-factor challenge, I'm putting the number in. But when I pop off the network and I go into my ERP, or I pop off the network and I go into some other third-party system, I pop off the network, go to my bank, I pop off the network and go to maybe one of my supply chain participants portals, I'm not using multi-factor. So the question, because I get a lot of head nods, question isn't, do you have it? It's, do you have it everywhere? Insurance carriers have been requiring that people have two-factor on their main business systems. And then if you have, well, how many people have an IT staff? So some of you bigger folks do. But would require that the IT staff, that what we call privileged accounts, the administrative accounts, that those have multi-factor. We're beginning to see the carriers push for the everything. So that's something that you want to have in place. And then update software. Again, this is where that home exposure gets kind of interesting. You might have a managed service provider that's keeping your software up to date. You might have your IT team that's keeping your software up to date. But if your home and personal systems are blending into the network, are you keeping those up to date? Because that's going to be a really good vector in if they're not patched. There's some other technologies on the list that the checklist that we provided. You want to protect the endpoint. There's a whole bunch of crazy acronyms. If you guys talk tech with anybody, it's managed detection and response, network detection and response, endpoint detection and response. It's marketing departments with Scrabble boxes, putting the letters together. But it really means we need, the old antivirus, we need to protect that endpoint. That's not on this list from the NCSA, but it's on our checklist to make sure that that malware that's trying to be injected into your system can be defended against. And then if it's there, we can easily find it, or your managed service can easily find it. To threat hunt without some of those tools is difficult. And so that goes beyond what the NCSA has recommended, but it's on that checklist that we provided. And then kind of level up, logging and monitoring. I didn't notice it. Well, there's a camera up there, but I think it's more about the conference room. I didn't notice that there were cameras when I came into the building. There's physical cameras everywhere. And so we know a lot of times now, you come down to the office at GBQ, when you get off the elevator, you're on camera. All the blind spots in the office was a safe office building. It's locked. You have to have a pass to get upstairs. There's a man catcher, so you have to get buzzed in when you come off the elevator, but there's still cameras. So we know what's going on in our space. Kind of a dumb place to break into because the ATF is like, what, two floors down. So don't pick another target. But we know what's going on in our physical space. You probably do in your business when these crazy kind of clickbait crime stories that hit the internet. a lot of times they're assembling the path of the person, the criminal, from all the cameras. Logging monitoring is really just doing that on your network. What's normal? We know what normal is, then we can use some of that information to understand when something abnormal is happening. And if something bad happens, there's two things logging allows us to do. One is to get to the root cause, to solve the problem so it doesn't happen again, and restore things and get the bad guys out. The second reason is many times you're required by a regulator, or you may have to have that information to defend yourself. And many times when we come in and do a breach investigation, there are no logs. So I didn't hear, we were talking earlier about the types of business. Are there any healthcare businesses in the room? So if you are HIPAA regulated and don't log, the way the regulations read that if you can't prove the bad thing didn't happen, you have to report it like it did. So logging serves a number of purposes. It helps defend, as it detects bad things coming in, and then something bad happens, it lets us unwind it. And then if something bad happens, it lets us report on what happened. In those cases, we may have to report. We all have a duty to report breaches of personally identifiable information in the state of Ohio, depending on the size of that data. So we all have some exposure to that, no matter what size our business is. We want to do backups, and we want to test those backups. Again, the example I shared about NetSuite, you want to back everything up. Many times we just back up what's on the network, and what's on the network kind of gets fuzzy these days with 365. You want to make sure that all your data is backed up. When we hit the audit trail January, if you are one of our clients in the financial audit space, you'll have somebody from my team or from our IT audit team go through IT general controls. It really speaks to the security, the cybersecurity controls that need to be in place to protect the integrity of your data. There are more questions about backup than there are about any other technology in that audit that we do. And many times we find clients are not in the best of position to be able to restore their financial data if there's an attack. There's a lot more out there. If you're a bigger company, work with your IT people. You want to make sure that everything that's critical is being backed up. You want to test those backups. You want to test the restoration. Can I restore to hard metal? Meaning, can I completely lose the system, bring a new system in, and restore the data? And then I want to do that on a regular basis. Your cyber carrier probably requires it. And then we want to encrypt the data. If this laptop is not encrypted, and we'll go down for lunch, and my slide deck was like this top secret thing, somebody could figure out how to get it off the hard drive. The same thing with confidential data. In some regulatory situations, if it's not encrypted, I have to report it's lost. But if it's encrypted, it's essentially a brick. It's difficult to restore that data. So you want to make sure all your devices are encrypted, particularly those ones that are bouncing around, laptops or other devices like that. We worked with a business that would ship laptops out to remote call center people, and they would not get the laptops back because there's just a ginormous amount of turnover. And they encrypted their system so they could shut them down remotely and wouldn't expose their clients. So any device that's mobile absolutely needs to be encrypted, but you really want to encrypt everything. And again, you want to make sure that you know where the keys are, because it's the master key. If you lose the master key, it's encrypted and it's going to keep me out and it's going to keep you out too. But you want to make sure that you've encrypted that data. So this human element piece is pretty interesting. I chose a chocolate bar. You guys probably don't know why I chose the chocolate bar. There was a group out in England that went and would say, "Hey, Megan, I'm going to give you a chocolate bar if you give me your log on and your password." And I forget the number of people that for a chocolate bar gave their log on and password. The bad guys are really good at kind of pulling on the emotional strings that we have as human beings. And so most phishing attacks, uh, attacks that are human oriented, we're seeing phone call attacks. We're seeing the texting attacks that I was talking about earlier, all involve that human, and they're punching a button. That, oh my gosh, I've got to fine in another state, or I'm not going to get my tax return, or I've got to act now to win this prize. They're all of those are pushing emotional buttons. So we as humans tend to trust authority. I forget, the texts are kind of ridiculous. It's like the state of Ohio. I keep getting them. The state of Ohio has me with parking violations, and I've got to pay the Michigan toll. It's twisted. It's people that I guess probably don't understand our governance structure. But you get a message that says that there's a fine you haven't paid, that you're going to lose access to a system, that you're going to lose your license. That makes people respond. It punches buttons. Likewise, when I raise people's fear, that fight or flight, if I can punch that button and kind of pull that fear up, bad guys will do that as well. We've seen a couple situations in family-owned businesses where family member is one spouse is working in the business, or probably the better example was a business where the G1 had retired but still wanted to come to the office every day. And even though they had an IT department, he got a call at the office, one of these help desk pop-ups that says your system's infected. Now I got fear's running through my system. And instead of bothering anybody, dad went and called this service on his own and lost control of his system, which then, because he was still connected to the business systems in the business, exposed the family. But it was, had dad been there on the guest network and not a part of the business systems, the same thing would have been accomplished. He really just wanted to be around the business. He enjoyed the people there, wanted to have his office. He wasn't participating in the business anymore. He had technically retired, but he was vulnerable to it. We've had other situations where family members at home have been attacked, and then that's blended into the business. Those pop-up attacks are fairly common. And oh no, your system is infected, or we know what you've been looking at and we're going to share, and you've never been looking at anything. You lose your common sense. And people kind of respond to that. Social proof sometimes as well, that everybody else is doing it sort of thing. We tend to kind of get in that stream and go with it as humans. So humans are a lot easier to pick on. We use a report, the Verizon Data Breach Investigation Report. Every year, Verizon looks at about 13 sources of breach events, and studies why. Every year for the last decade, every business sector, the human involved attacks been in the top 3. You'll get occasionally e-commerce, manufacturing, oddly enough. I think it's because there's so much e-commerce there. They'll get web attacks, which are really more about the technology. The old days of somebody breaking in a firewall are gone. There's a lot of literature out there, but the human firewall, I'm going to pick on the human. So you want to create a security culture in your business, where you're able to make security human and approachable. You want to implement continuous role-specific training. Many times we teach people how to behave on the network, but we don't tell the finance and accounting people that if they get an email with a bank address change from a client, they need to call the client, and they need to have the client's number written down somewhere, instead of saying, is that really you, in the email that is the attack email? And we see that all the time. So we want to train those people. We want to train people how to handle payment cards. You're required, if you do retail transactions, to manage the security of the cards, which includes training your people, but many times people don't. The flip side of that is you want to train people that, Darcy Congrove, our managing partner, will never, ever ask you to buy gift cards and send them to her in the email. You want to teach people what's good and what's not. You want to have written policies and procedures. The smaller the business, the more difficult that becomes, because you're trying to sell, you're trying to produce, and actually having the time and energy to sit down and write policies and procedures, but at least tell your people what's appropriate, what's acceptable, from their use of computers. You want to listen to employees. But generally, when you're up here, working on the business, they're down in the business, and they're seeing things that need to be corrected in the business. And so have some kind of a feedback mechanism, and then make it safe to report. We have been involved in events where something bad happens, we come in to investigate, but it was going on what we call the dwell time from the point of attack to the final was going on so long because culturally the CEO or whoever at the top of the food chain was just such an ogre that everybody was scared to report. And if there's smoke, I can put the fire out before it gets bad. If this raging inferno, and people are still scared to talk about it. So even if somebody does something bad, the best practice is to, let them self-report, deal with the situation. Obviously, if it's illegal or, it's a gross violation of policies, you need to address that. But you need to have a culture where people can come and report those things quickly. The reverse of that we've seen create some really bad dynamics. How many of you, and I asked this question, I was in a restaurant masterclass and we had 75 restaurant operators in the room, and I had one-on-one conversations with like 5 or 6 of them talking about breach events they had. And then when I asked the question, nobody raised their hand. So how many of you have had to deal with a security outage? There we got some brave people. Was it ransomware or is it business email compromise? What was it?
I'm an MSP, so we've dealt with lots of them.
Oh, yes, you would. Absolutely, you would. We probably have some great stories to share. Take this slide back, or I guess slides will be available for download. The time to deal with the breach is before the breach. You want to understand where your critical data is. You want to understand who does what. If I have a managed service provider, again, there's some level of shared responsibility in that agreement, I would assume, where you expect your clients to do some of it and you do some of it. Understand, have that conversation beforehand. Understand the law firm that you're going to call. Even if you don't put them on retainer, have a good cyber attorney available to you. Talk to your broker. We'll get to that in a moment. Understand what your carrier's role is going to be, and then write all that down. And it doesn't have to be some of you bigger businesses, it might need to be a big, large business continuity plan, but a small business can do it in a page or two. Here's the FBI's number. How do the incident reporting website for the FBI. And don't put those things on your computers. Put them somewhere, print them to paper and put them in a folder somewhere. Because many times the system that has all the information you need to respond is the one that was ransomware. So you want to do that. You want to make sure that you've got the ability to detect and analyze. From the bigger businesses are sitting over here, the smaller ones are over here. So I keep doing this, but the smaller business is a little bit more difficult. You get one of these pop-up attacks that says that your system has been encrypted, and all you need to do is reset your pop-up blocker and it goes away. Kind of a false positive, or maybe something really bad's happening. But understand, spend some time to educate yourself in terms of what you need to do to detect, and then understand how to contain the system. It's okay if one system has been compromised, to just unplug it off the net, take it off the network and unplug it. That's okay. Don't leave it running, because if somebody breaks in and gets onto one system, they're going to try to traverse and then escalate privileges. So they're going to go from system to system to system until they find the MSP or the computer admin, so they can take over more. So you want to isolate that system as quick as you can. And then we want to make sure we get all of our data back, and we want to learn from the experience. And that's something I would go back and take a look at. It's going to date me, but I've used this forever. Warren Zevon had a song called "Send Lawyers Guns and Money," and so some people misunderstand cyber insurance. Cyber insurance is after the bad thing happens, helps restore you. So lawyers, guns, and money helps restore you to where you were beforehand. Some policies will cover lost revenue. And so you want to work with somebody that can help you calculate the potential lost revenue. Sometimes it's your broker, sometimes it's an accountant. But understand also that sometimes things that we think of as crime or as cyber is considered to be crime. If I send you, under most policies today, if I send you a phishing attack and I get you to give me credentials to the bank account, that's a crime covered under crime policy, not cyber. And is there an insurance, anybody from an insurance firm in the room? So the insurance person is gonna be like, oh no, that's crime. Every one of us reasonably says, well, wait a minute, it started with an email, that's a cyber attack. Insurance firms aren't in the business of paying out claims. And so they have redefined some of this or put, carve outs in some of the policies. And so you want to have that conversation again before the bad thing happens. You also want to know what their role is, and you want to know what information you need to keep, and you want to know what you need to have available at the end of the event to turn it in to get your coverage. The receipt for the Bitcoin ATM at the convenience store down the street will not be reimbursed. The carriers have been farming Bitcoin forever, and they want to pay out of their stash that's managed. And we've seen that happen where firms have paid and then try to get the payment back. The really cool thing about having a carrier involved is because they see so much, they got really great data. And sometimes I think the bad guys and the carriers are kind of like, remember the cartoon Foghorn Leghorn? Where they would fight over the little chicken hawk, and then at the end of the day, they both log off. These guys know each other. I've been involved in events where you could tell from somebody's Bitcoin address who it was. And the insurance carriers negotiate with these folks all the time. And so they may have 7 or 8 negotiations at one time with the same hacker, and they know the personality. It's kind of weird. It's this, anonymous person, but they're a Bitcoin address. And if you pay this guy Bitcoin, you're gonna get your data back, and he'll send instructions to restore, and he's a gentleman about it. Others will give you a little bit and lie and start to scam all over again. And the insurance carriers know that. Some of the bigger forensics firms know that. It's cool, not cool, but it reminds me of Foghorn Leghorn. Don't have time to go through this. For the smaller businesses, this probably applies to go back and look at it. For some of you larger businesses, you may already be doing it. But again, it starts with knowing where my things are, making sure that I have multi-factor on everything, and then stepping through this 30, 60, 90 degree or 30, 60, 90 day plan to get to where you've got a secure posture. Some of you may already feel like you do. Again, I go back to that risk assessment stat that 1/5 of businesses do an annual risk assessment or security assessment. So many times we don't know where we're at in terms of that exposure. They don't have to be real expensive. Your people can do them for you. We certainly do them. But every year you should be taking a look at what's at risk. Am I protecting everything? Where are my things? Because we see, I don't know, some of you businesses that are a little bit bigger, we see shadow IT at GBQ all the time, where department heads, me, go out and buy technology I wanted because I knew I needed it. And then it ends up off the books, and we've put, last 12, 18 months, the hammers come down. And we've saved money and we've improved our security posture, but every business probably allows their employees to do a little bit too much in terms of the technology they acquire, some of which you don't have to pay for these days. So you can't find a payment in the general ledger system for, HubSpot, your starting point for a CRM is free. So you have client data out in some of these systems and you don't even know about it. So, go through annually, where's my stuff? Is it at risk? Are there bad actors that might try to get to it? Is it likely that somebody will try to take it down or use one of these attacks or other attacks to get to it? And then, what's my loss? And if my loss isn't something that I'm willing to tolerate, then invest in security controls, change the system, move the data, make some management decisions. Last slide. Feel free to reach out if you've got, you want to talk about things. It's kind of hard to hit. You get small businesses and bigger businesses, and any one of these, I could do an hour on ransomware. So it's kind of hard to do a summary across the board. But if there's things that you came thinking you were going to hear that you didn't, we can talk about them now. Talk about them at lunch, or you can reach out. The graphic I've got over here is a tool that we use. It's called Security Scorecard. The insurance carriers today are using open source intelligence. So they're looking at publicly available information. They're grading your company. BitSights, Risk Recon, we like Scorecard, and we use it. If you want a scorecard run on your business, just send me a note. We run them for free. This is not a real company. Ovo Finance is a made-up firm that Scorecard uses, but in this case, the company is performing less than the market. So the spider graph, there, the yellow and the blue dots are what the market is doing in terms of their industry. The C, average isn't bad, but it's not good. But they've got an F with network security. They got an F with patching cadence. They're probably vulnerable. We'll also send a detailed report. So it's not just the scorecard, it's why the grade is what it is. That might let you flip some bits and bytes or talk to your managed service provider to correct it. But your insurance carriers, and depending on the business you're in, your potential clients may be running these reports on you. And so when we do speaking engagements for our clients, we'll occasionally run them for free. That's a step. And then I made reference to phishing testing. We have a know before relationship. If any of you do phishing, the odds are most of you are using know before. But if you want to run a baseline test to see what your exposure is from phishing, we can do that free of charge as well, just to kind of give you some information. Feel free to reach out on that. Any questions? Thank you.